Next we've got our global function button. This allows you to globally set up your parameters to make general changes of how you want your MPD to function. I'll give you an overview of that. Pressing the global button gives you, bring it closer here, I don't know if you could see, I'll make it a lot clearer. Gives you page 1 of a function of your MPD that you could set. At the moment, page 1 gives you the kill MIDI option, all notes off. So for example, if say you're playing one pad and you hear variations of different sounds coming from that one pad, by just highlighting this option there and pressing enter, you kill out the multiple sounds that you're getting or feedback from that pad. Instead of just having your basic one, you get a feedback of various different sounds. You would just go into this option here, press enter, and that will kill out that sound there, and then you end up being back to where you normally are. Next global page you have, again, you use your directional buttons to go through the various options that you have. So you got up to page 11, so maximum page 11 of different global settings that you could set on your MPD. Moving to the second page, we have your common channel, where you got your normal common channels that you could adjust or change. So that basically allows you to select what MIDI channels will be used as your main common channel. Again, using the rotary there gives you the option to select the various channels, various MIDI channels. Pressing enter will highlight the channels that you want to have. Moving to the next section of page 3, you've got your LCD contrast. Quite fairly simple. Use a rotary to adjust how clear or how sharp you want the LCD to be displayed. Turning it all the way down, completely blanking it out. Normally I prefer to have it at 55, so depending on how bright how bright it is in your area, where so much contrast or less of a contrast, to make it difficult for you to actually view the LCD, you adjust it accordingly to how you want, and enter. Page 4, pad sensitivity. Pad sensitivity is how sensitive the pads are when you touch them. So you've got from 16 to 1. Enter. 1 being not so as sensitive as you want it to be. 16 being quite fairly sensitive to get the velocity that you need. So I tend to have my one. I like my pads to be quite sensitive. So depending on how sensitive you like your pads to be, you could adjust that accordingly there. Page 5, you got your pad curves. Now the pad curves is how the pads will output its velocity based on the force that you apply to it. A being not a lot of force is required to output the velocity to the speakers, to the sound going out into the software. You've got A, B being on that normal level, CD being a stronger level, so you're getting a lot more oomph or strong curve output going out into the out of the hardware itself. I tend to like to have my normal as A. Moving to the next page, you've got the pad threshold. Now the pad threshold adjusts the threshold of minimum force that is required to activate the pad. And what I mean by that is, at the moment it's set to 1. So 1 meaning, get rid of that, it's a bit dirty, the pad. 1 meaning you don't really need a lot of force to activate the pad. You say going all the way up to 16, however, 16, you can't really hear anything unless you really give it a good whack. So threshold determines the minimum force that is required for you to activate the pad. I like to have mine on 1, so that way I like to know without really much force I can activate the pad. Moving into the next page, you've got the MIDI clock. MIDI clock is where you could select internal or external MIDI clock sources. So if I want eternally to be using, for example, my tap tempo on the bass itself, I will select that. So I select how I want my tempo to function as relates to the pads, compared to if I was to come closer there, let me just go back there, select it externally. I'm going to determine that external sources that I'm using will determine how I want my tempo to be, and that shuts off the functionality of adjusting your tempo on the hardware itself, so that, which is why you don't have anything flashing there. So whenever I try to set the tempo on my DAW, it's not going to happen. It's more or less the DAW is the one that's setting the tempo for the MPD26 itself. So you've got the option there, external clock, internal clock. Bringing it back to internal clock brings the tempo functionality on the hardware itself. Page 8 is your tap tempo average. Now that allows you to select the number of taps that is required to determine how you want to set your tempo. It varies from 2, 3 to 4. Example of that is 4. An average 4 tap is needed to determine your tempo. Going here to the tempo button, you see it's flashing, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know what it's set at. Say by pressing 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, you've set your tempo there. You've determined by pressing it 4 times, at the end of that 4 interval, it will set itself at that tempo. So if I wanted it to go faster, 1, 2, 3, 4, that sets it up there. Putting it to only 2, so meaning I need 2 taps in order for it to set the tempo. 1, 2. 2 taps is only required. 1, 2. So that determines the tap average required. I like to set mine at 4, so it's a lot easier for me. It's up to you how you want yours to be set. Moving on to page 9. Now page 9 is a global save. That overall saves all your global settings that you've adjusted to the hardware. Quite fairly simple, straightforward. You press enter. Every time you do press enter, sometimes when you press enter it will go back to the very first page. So you've set up what global settings that you want your MPD, how you want your MPD to function as. Going back into global, going through the pages, you've got your save option there as 9. Number 10, you've got your SYS EX, where you can transfer a preset via the SYSX. So, I mean, later on I'll go into more details of each functions, but that's just a global setting where you're able to transfer via certain presets to this main preset of your DAW preset that you have set up. Back into global, looking at last version, so we've got 10. Page 11 is the current firmware version of your MPD, version 1.0. 1.0. God, I'm losing my voice. 1.0. So this pretty much checks the current firmware version of your MPD26. So that is a general view of the global function button.